Hello and welcome to Betws y Coed in North Wales, a village tucked inside a valley of churning rivers and autumnal russet-flecked forests. We're on the edge of Snowdonia and visitors stream here for fresh air, hiking, mountain biking and more. A reviving escape for our four politicians, who I hope might resist any rambling. We are the guests of the Field Studies Council, an environmental education charity that provides opportunities for people of all ages to come and explore the natural world. The field centre we're in, Betws y Coed, is a beautiful Georgian building a mile outside the village. Let's meet our panellists. Dame Angela Regal is the Labour MP for Wallasey and has been in the Commons since 1992. She was a minister in the Blair and Brown governments and long before that was a junior chess champion. Sam Rowlands is a Conservative member of the Welsh Parliament and represents the North Wales region. He speaks for the party on local government issues. Also in the Senedd is Adam Price, the leader of Plaid Cymru, which campaigns for an independent Wales. Last year, Plaid signed a cooperation agreement with the Labour government in Cardiff. And we're joined by Helen Morgan, the Liberal Democrat MP for North Shropshire. Formerly a chartered accountant, Helen entered Parliament in December after demolishing the previous Tory majority in a by-election. Betws y Coed, your Any Questions panel. And our first question is from Gary Newman. Hello, Gary.
Hello. My question is, should Rishi Sunak be going to COP27?
Angela Regal.
Yes. Let me elaborate on that a bit. I think that we've reached a very, very dangerous point in terms of trying to keep 1.5 alive, as they say. After COP26, there were a range of promises made that governments would deliver on the promises that they made there to try to stop catastrophic global warming. Since then, we've seen in this current fourth iteration of Tory governments since 2019, Alok Sharma, who is the president to hand over to the Egyptians when he goes, demoted from the cabinet. COP questions are next week in the Commons and he cannot answer them because he's no longer a minister. And yet we're meant to be told that the government is actually prioritising green issues and getting this done. It clearly isn't. It's too busy. It's been too busy trying to introduce fracking again, although that's now, we've U-turned on that. It's been too busy trying to deal with the mess it's made of our economy. So yes, he should go. Biden's going. Macron's going. Why on earth aren't we?
But Angela, there's a huge domestic economic crisis here. What's so bad about the Prime Minister prioritising work here? The COP summit ends the day after the Chancellor's due to set out his budget plans.
He only has to go for a day. He has to make an appearance. He doesn't have to spend the entire time there. And Rishi Sunak can't carry on being the Chancellor as well as the Prime Minister. So he should be representing us there. He should be pointing out to the world that we take this seriously. It's hard to believe we do if he can't be bothered to show up.
Adam Price.
Yeah, this is the single most important question of our time. And Prime Minister Sunak has referred to the impact that his daughters have had on his views of the environment. As a father myself, every day I think about what world I'm bequeathing to my own children. I hope that his daughters can convince him to change his mind. Because, it says something, doesn't it, about the attitude and how important this new administration, if we want to see it in those terms, views this absolutely critical question. And think about, think of the trade-off. Let's think about the economics. The economics. If we do not change course, then not only will the economy be trashed, if you wanted to see it in those narrow terms, the entire planet will be trashed. We will be passing on to the next generation the most bitter legacy of all, an uninhabitable Earth. And if he cannot understand that and that symbolism matters, and that his presence there will underline the commitment of the government to keep to their promises and urge the rest of the nations around the world to do more than we are currently, because at the moment we're not going to reach anything like 1.5%. Unless he realises that, then he should not be Prime Minister.
Sam Rowlands, Adam Price says it's symbolic, a symbolic failure that the Prime Minister's not going.
In a perfect world, in normal circumstances, the Prime Minister should be there, absolutely. But we are not in perfect circumstances domestically at all at the moment. And as we know, the Prime Minister has been in post just a matter of days, and he has a laser-like focus, rightfully so, on ensuring that the domestic economy that we have here in the UK is on the right track, and hence why there's a significant amount of work needed before the 17th of November. And let's not forget that the fact is there will be the Foreign Secretary in attendance, the Business Secretary in attendance, the Environment Secretary in attendance, the Climate Minister will be in attendance as well as the President of the COP as well. And Adam Price mentioned that symbols matter, symbolic is important, but let's not just judge things on symbolism and not just on words and attending meetings. Let's judge on the actions that this government is undertaking. And let's just remind ourselves what some of those actions are. Last year, we saw £24 billion worth of investment across carbon sectors in the UK. It's a 40% reduction in emissions across recent decades. And did we not last year see in COP26 90% of the world's economy committing to carbon neutral measures? So that's a record that we're working through. That's a record, not just turning up for meetings. And he said he's
going to keep the ban on onshore wind. He's not only demoted Alok Sharma from the cabinet, he's demoted the climate change minister.
We might come on to some of these, Adam Price. Let me bring in Helen Morgan.
Well, I think we need to look at the global context of the economy, which is that we're over-reliant on fossil fuels. That's why the war in Ukraine has had such catastrophic impact on our economy. It's why Putin has so much power. And we should be at COP27 with other world leaders, making sure we get away from that reliance on essentially brutal dictatorships to provide us with our energy. There's an environmental imperative, and there's a world economic imperative. And if we want to be a world power, then we need to be on a world stage with other leaders. And it's an embarrassment that he's not going. And I think it's also a shame that the King isn't going, because he represents not only the United Kingdom, but lots of other countries across the world as well. And I think we should be there, showing that we take it seriously and providing leadership in that context.
But they've stopped the King going. They've stopped that symbolism. The Prime Minister's now not going. He's demoted the man responsible for chairing for the entire year, all to clean up a mess that this government created in the first place with its ideological mini budget that tanked the economy.
Let's move on to question 2, which is a related subject. Rich Snaith.
Hello. The UN says there is no credible pathway to limit global heating to 1.5 degrees. The only way to limit the worst impacts is a rapid transformation of societies. What does this transformation look like?
Adam Price, as part of the move away from fossil fuels, the UK government wants 8 new nuclear reactors, including one on Anglesey. Do you think that's part of the answer?
No, I think renewable energy is by far the more mature technology, and the one that we can actually deploy quickest in order to have the quickest impact. And so, that is where we should be focusing our attention, our resources. And, we've got worrying suggestions that the UK government now is going to, as part of its budget statement, its autumn statement, is going to be rowing back from the R&D investment in things like decarbonisation of our steel industry and R&D in renewable energy. So disastrous. What the question, though, is about a deeper transformation. The question is about a deeper transformation, because you cannot, I think, completely disentangle what's happening to our environment, to the state of our society as a whole. We can see the the vast, morally disgusting sight of the super profits of the fossil fuel industry on the one hand, and yet the cost of living crisis at the other. And so the two crises, the two emergencies, the climate change emergency and I think the cost of living crisis and the crisis of inequality, they're two sides of the same coin. We've got to have a social transformation. We've got to have a society which is much more equal and doesn't concentrate power, political and economic, in fewer and fewer hands. Because the two things are actually heading us not just to an environmental disaster, but to a social disaster as well. I think that's what the UN is pointing to, the need for that wider social, economic and political transformation.
Angela Eagle.
Firstly, I think what the UN is saying ought to be a wake-up call. We are in the last decade of the time that we've credibly got to deal with this problem, and we are 2 years into it, and there's still no progress. In the UK, we have to have a complete transformation of the way that we generate and distribute energy. This should be a national mission, which should be about completely retooling the way our economy works. It could provide plenty of new green jobs, whilst we invest in new infrastructure which can make us carbon neutral by 2030. I mean, the Labour Party at its conference, Keir, said that we would create a new company called GB Energy, which is about basically meaning that we'll have the long-term investment we need for clean energy generated in the UK, including onshore wind, and that money would go into a pot that would then help transform the way our houses are insulated, the way that jobs and supplies to make this transformation.
And this week
happens.
the Welsh Government has set up plans to set up a new publicly owned energy company.
The Welsh Government have made a similar statement this week.
The first projects will achieve planning consent by the end of the decade. Yeah. Does that sound rapid to you?
No, it's got to be faster. It's got to be faster. I think people need to wake up to the urgency of the situation. I think the human race actually only gets really creative as the cliff edge approaches, and we now need to do it. It's really important.
Helen Morgan.
I think, first of all, we need a government that takes it seriously. If we look at what's happened in this country since 2015, over 1 million homes have been built that aren't to an appropriate standard, that aren't properly insulated. We've talked about COP27. They're going to spend more on road building than they are on climate change. And we need it needs to be the priority of our government, absolutely. But there are ways that we all need to change our lives. We need to reduce our dependency on the private car and have a public transport system that would enable people to participate properly in the economy, going back to what Alan said. And we need to focus on the renewable projects that can be quickly delivered. So we need to be looking at Cardiff Bay tidal power, Swansea Bay tidal power, and offshore and onshore wind, and we need to be doing it right now.
The last election, the Liberal Democrat manifesto said you'd get to net zero by 2045. Again, is that rapid enough? And if not, what needs to be done?
It's not rapid enough. Evidently, the UN have said today that we're not going to get to 1.5. It's really problematic. So no, we need to absolutely reassess that and speed up. And as I said before, there's an economic and a geopolitical priority as well as an environmental
and there's an important local dimension here, so the relocalisation of the economy, and that works in energy. So actually the Welsh Government through the cooperation agreement with Plaid Cymru, setting up another publicly owned energy company which will work faster than the one you referred to, because it's working through community owned energy. We used to have situations where communities did own their own local energy infrastructure, and that's what we've got to go back to, and actually have the benefit of that kept within the local economy, so bills come down and we can regenerate the local economy. And things like local procurement as well, making sure that we are not procuring essential items from across the world. We learned through COVID, didn't we, the importance of actually building up a manufacturing base again, not just through the Green New Deal in terms of those technologies, but more widely, so that we can actually create a circular economy where we keep as much of the value as locally as possible.
Let me bring in Sam Rowlands. Sorry, Angela Eagle. Sam Rowlands.
Yeah, thank you. I think Adam actually makes some important points there around around the role that community energy can play in communities, and especially here in Wales. But that also has to be balanced with the way we work across the United Kingdom in some of the larger energy infrastructure projects. And that's why we asked a question about how do we have this rapid transformation. There's certainly a need for investment in areas like nuclear. We can know it at Wilfyn Newydd down the road here on Ynys Môn, on Anglesey. There's great opportunity there to have a significant impact onto our carbon output as a nation if that investment can take place there. And also in Trallsfynydd, not too far from here as well, where the small modular reactor project could make a big difference. I think the other thing that perhaps we haven't mentioned so far, which could be a game changer, is the role that hydrogen has to play for us here in the UK. And there's some fantastic opportunities across the UK for hydrogen to make a significant part. And in particular here in North Wales, where we see the role between the north-east of Wales and north-west of England could play a significant role in producing hydrogen, which will make a big difference to the carbon output here in the UK.
Just quickly, Sam, there's a lot of weather in this part of Wales, I've noticed. The Prime Minister has said again, no onshore wind, and he's against solar farms. Why are you so opposed to these things?
We've seen significant investment, haven't we, in onshore wind over recent decades, and here in North Wales, there's significant investment in offshore wind as well. I think there's some questions to be asked around the longevity of some of these units. So they typically have a 25-year sort of life cycle, and other ways in actually producing the same amount of energy, which is less intensive in some of the manufacturing. So let's go back to this idea of nuclear. The significant output that a nuclear power station can play here in North Wales is so much more than scattering wind farms all over our hills.
But you know,
Can I just ask
Malaysia owns more of our offshore wind output than the UK government does. That can't be right.
Can I just pick up on what Sam said about nuclear and come back to where I started with you, please? Adam, your former leader, David Wigley, said that the case for nuclear power now has to be made with conviction and confidence and some urgency. There's quite a split with Implied Cymru on this question, isn't there?
Well, we're a democratic party and there are a range of views. I mean, I think that in terms of having the greatest impact as quickly as possible, I think it's unanswerably the case that actually renewable energy is the best way forward. And there's huge opportunities there for us. Not least in Wales, as you say, we're surrounded on three sides by water, and it's pretty windy a lot of the time, anyway. If
you would like to have your say on this question, on COP, on energy, on the climate, or indeed anything else that we're talking about, please call Anita Anand on any answers tomorrow. Lines open at 12:30 on Saturday. 03700 100 444, 03700 100 444, and we can go to our next question, which is from Glenn Evans. Hi, Glenn.
Hello. Croeso. Why isn't NHS Wales performing better than NHS England?
Sam Rowlands.
Well, we have the NHS here in Wales, which is under the leadership and is run by the Labour government in Cardiff. And as Glenn just pointed out, the performance of the NHS in Wales is significantly behind that of other places in the United Kingdom. In fact, we have one in five of our residents here in Wales on a waiting list. Of those 1 in 5 on a waiting list, 1 in 4 are waiting for more than 1 year to be seen. And of those on that waiting list, also 59,000 have been waiting for more than 2 years to be seen.
In comparison, I should just, because I've got lots of statistics here, in comparison, those waiting over 2 years in Scotland is about 7,500, in England, 2,500.
Yeah, so having 59,000 here in Wales, which is a much smaller nation than the rest of those countries you mentioned, that is a problem. And it's not right that people in Wales have to suffer whilst they're waiting on those waiting lists. Now, there's a number of things that could be done to deal with this. We've talked about having rapid clinics like they have in England to kind of fast track people through to be seen as quickly as possible, and there's much better planning that needs to take place for winter. Now, I have a brother and a sister who are both nurses in the National Health Service, and I know firsthand some of the pressures that they're under. So it's not the issue of the nurses or the doctors on the front line. It's a leadership issue from Cardiff, but they're not grabbing the bull by the horns and not listening to the voice of many residents in my region in North Wales and across Wales who are sick to the back teeth of the performance of the NHS.
Angela Eagle, not grabbing the bull by the horns in Cardiff.
Well, I mean, I think the NHS across the entire country is on its knees. I think it suffered with the flatlining budgets that were given to it before the pandemic, and the COVID pandemic has made things much, much worse. I think the workloads and the number of vacant places in the NHS because of lack of workload planning have been an issue. So not only are nurses now effectively earning 20% in real terms less than they did in 2010 because of these funding problems, they're having to work harder. Many people are thinking of leaving because they're burnt out after the COVID pandemic. And I just think that there needs to be much closer looks at what you can do to fund it properly. If you look at the Welsh NHS budget, in real terms, it's 1.5 billion lower if you take account of inflation than it was.
But is that the reason that the statistics are as bad as they are in Wales?
It's part of the reason, but clearly not all of the reason.
Can we just understand the funding does come into Wales? For every £1 spent in England on public services, Wales receives £1.20. So 20% uplift on funding on public services here in Wales. So this funding excuse for the NHS in Wales is not an excuse that holds water.
Well, when you talk about funding excuse, what you're talking about is saying that the people that work in the NHS should take real terms pay cuts and be 20% worse off. So be working 1 day in the week for nothing, effectively, compared to 2010. We need investment in the NHS to create, for example, double the amount of district nurses, 5,000 new health visitors, 10,000 new nurses and midwives, double the number of doctor training places to deal with the workforce issue. And then, of course, you've got to make certain that you can have pandemic recovery.
Let me bring in Helen Morgan. Your constituency is on the border. I wonder, do you see the difference between England and Wales? And do you think, as Angela is suggesting, that it's really a money problem? Or are there bigger solutions
I didn't say
here
it was
that
only a money
governments
problem,
across the UK need to be thinking about as they tackle these shared problems?
Well, what I see in Shropshire is a rural health service that is absolutely on its knees. And in all honesty, because we interact most closely with Wrexham, which is obviously a more urban centre, we don't necessarily see a worse problem in Wales than we see in England.
Wrexham's got the worst A&E waiting time in Wales.
But in my experience,
Worst A&E waiting time in the UK.
Finish.
Based on
All
what I see
A&E waiting times
in Shropshire is a workforce issue more than a funding issue, and particularly in social care. So in Shropshire, we have people who block beds in hospitals because we don't have any care workers, and because they are very poorly paid, because they're being hit very hard by fuel prices and moving around this big rural area, and because it's hard to recruit into the vacancies in rural places. So if I look at Shropshire, we have terrible return times for scans for cancer, and that's not because we don't have the budget for the scanning equipment or the people. We can't recruit the radiologist. And so we need a workforce plan that looks at the chronic shortfall of staffing across the whole NHS. And we also need to recognise that these individuals are working so hard, they are so burnt out, that they can't keep going, and they don't see any light at the end of the tunnel, which is why they're leaving. So we need to give these hard-working people some hope so that they don't leave the NHS in their droves and leave us with these even ever-worsening vacancy problems.
Adam Price, do you think... What's the root cause of the problem in your view? Is it a money question? Is it recruitment question? Some of the solutions here.
Yeah, I think that first of all we need honesty. The NHS in Wales. This is the birthplace of the NHS. The NHS in Wales is on life support. It is in the deepest state of crisis that it has ever been in its history. And I think it's not enough to blame the Tories, right? I'm all for calling the Tories out, where we need to, and goodness gracious, we do need to. But in this case, we have a government of our own. And there are financial issues. Wales doesn't get the proper funding formula in terms of reflecting our older population. Yes, absolutely. But, huge mistakes are being made. There's no workforce. Health isn't in the cooperation agreement because we disagree with the Welsh Labour government. That's why.
But you think that the Welsh government needs more money, and one of the things you've called for is a solidarity tax on high earners. Will you be pressing your friends in the Welsh government to go for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think at a time like this, our values here are very much based on solidarity. We have nurses. Nurses are crying on wards at the moment. They are exhausted, coming out of COVID, and they feel undervalued, and they're leaving the NHS in droves. To give the nurses have been offered in Wales by a supposedly socialist government a pay award that even Labour-affiliated Unison have said is derisory. 5% when inflation is running at 10%. Even if you were to at least top that up, so it at least kept pace with inflation, what would it cost for nurses in Wales? It would cost 50 million. If you can't find 50 million in a budget of 18,000 million to give nurses at least an inflation pay rise, you shouldn't be running a government. You certainly shouldn't be calling yourself socialist. We've got to actually support the workforce. We've got to actually look at the problems in social care as well. We need to pay them a decent wage because the knock-on effects, the fact that social care in Wales, just as in England, is in crisis, means that people stay too long in hospitals, means that people are literally then waiting and sometimes sadly dying in ambulances outside our hospitals here too.
And sorry, Eagle, can I ask you quickly, do you like the idea of the sort of solidarity tax, as he's calling it, that Adam Price is suggesting, that might pour more money into public services like the NHS?
I mean,
just
look,
quickly.
What we have said is that we will take away the non-dom status and use that money to pay for the workforce plan that I was talking about earlier. Rachel Reeves has said that she will explain how anything we say will be funded following the car crash that the government have just made of our economy and how we get our fiscal sustainability back as a country. But clearly you've got to look to see how you can put more money in. For example, the Conservatives at the moment are promising GP appointments within 14 days. I mean, it was 2 days when we last had a Labour government.
But shouldn't a Labour government, which has, in Wales, it has income tax levers that it can use. Given the state of crisis that the NHS is under, shouldn't a Labour government be using those levers and income tax powers in a progressive way, to at least make some contribution to addressing the deep crisis that we see in our
We will talk about the health service again, but I need to move on to our next question, I'm afraid, which is from Jill Miller. Hi, Jill.
Hello. Was the appointment of Suella Braverman a wise decision?
Sam Rowlands.
I thought it might come to me first on that one. Clearly, the resignation of the Home Secretary was in the previous iteration of the government.
There have been a few.
She recognised that she'd made an error and fronted up to that and tendered her resignation. What I'm pleased about with the new cabinet that we have under Rishi Sunak is that he's been willing and wanting to bring in further experience into that cabinet. So I think our Home Secretary brings that with her as well. And she will be certainly looking to focus on some significant jobs at hand, not least the ambition to have 20,000 new police officers here on our streets, of which we're at over 15,000 newly recruited posts. So she's been brought back into the cabinet. We've got an experienced cabinet there now, and I'm looking forward to what the future months have to hold.
Helen, was it a wise decision?
I think the short answer is no. I think it was a poor decision. I think we've seen, it's about a year since the North Shropshire by-election was called, and we saw what undermining standards in public life leads to, and we've seen a continuing saga of sleaze and scandal for a whole year in which the government haven't dealt with some of the other much more important issues we've been talking about this evening, like the cost of living, like the crisis in the NHS, and like the climate crisis. And so to say, you know, moments after you've made your speech saying that you're going to bring back integrity into public life, to walk back in the door of number 10 and appoint somebody who resigned 6 days earlier for breaking the ministerial code, I'm going to coin a phrase, I think that is a disgrace. And I think it just proves that they don't take public life and integrity seriously. It's one rule for them and another rule for everyone else.
Adam Price.
Yeah, it doesn't fill you with great confidence, is it, that the MI5 apparently are going to do a seminar for the new Home Secretary, you know, one of the great offices of state on, you know, on confidentiality, and even the former chair, you've got to stay awake to keep up with the pace of events at Westminster, but the former chair of the Conservative Party even suggesting that she effectively lied in saying that she fessed up. You know, it was actually the other way round, that she was confronted by the Cabinet Secretary who actually advised Prime Minister Sunak not to reappoint her to the Cabinet. And there we are. The Cabinet Secretary ignored MI5 scared witless, and a Home Secretary who actually has broken the ministerial code again, if it's correct. And they can't both be right, can they?
Number 10 has said Suella Braverman has strong relationships with the security services following concerns about her return as Home Secretary. Angela Regal.
Well, she is known as Leaky Sue, so I'm sure that they will have a strong relationship with her. I mean, the Prime Minister promised integrity, professionalism and accountability. And then he reappointed a woman who was sacked by Liz Truss because she couldn't be trusted to keep her emails. She sent emails to a person another member of Parliament, who apparently is the shadow Home Secretary, because he keeps advising her. Well, if it's him that's advising her, they should make him the Home Secretary so we can hold him accountable in Parliament. She then sent one to the wrong person, trying to send something to his wife. She then, according to reports from Jake Berry, who is the chair of the Tory party, denied it. There's multiple breaches of the ministerial code. I don't think 6 days is enough of a punishment when you've been sacked for security breaches. So I think she's a national security threat. We have a Home Secretary who is not accountable to Parliament because she can't be bothered to turn up to explain herself.
There were also reports that suggested as Attorney General she was investigated over the leak of a story involving MI5. Now, the Cabinet Office has not responded to the BBC's question about the leak inquiry, including whether or not Ms Braverman was questioned, if the police were involved, or if anyone was arrested or questioned under caution. The Attorney General didn't respond to queries either. But let me ask Sam Rowlands. Against that backdrop, was it, to go back to the question, was it wise to bring somebody back who was the shortest serving Home Secretary in history, quit or resigned just days before, then backed Rishi Sunak in the leadership contest, and now has returned to government? Are you comfortable about it? Do you think it's the right judgment?
I'm really happy that we have a cabinet which is an experienced cabinet and is going to deliver on the needs of the country and the challenges that we have right in front of us, and the Home Secretary will do that.
Thank you.
I don't.
If you'd like to talk about that and have a view about Suella Braverman, do call Anita. Any answers? 03700 100 444. And we're on to our next question, which is Michelle Underwood. Hello, Michelle.
Hi there. The average salary in the Conway is 24,000, and the average prices of houses is between 170,000 and 240,000. What can we do about the housing crisis, second home ownership and holiday lets?
Can I quickly ask you, Michelle, are you experiencing this problem yourself? I mean, is it?
No, unfortunately not, actually.
Right, but it's something that a lot of people in the area are concerned about. Adam Price.
It's It's been a massive problem for too long, and finally we're getting some action at a national level in Wales. So we're going to have the ability to cap second homes for the first time ever. We're giving local authorities, through the cooperation agreement, we're giving local authorities the power to set a higher premium in council tax on second homes. And that will have an impact then on the demand for second homes. But at the same time, where some local authorities, Gwynedd has already announced, for example, that they're going to use the money from the premium to actually then help local people buy affordable homes. So you've got, through the tax, some of those homes are coming onto the market even now as people are selling up, second home owners. And you've got the local authority there actually supporting people through shared equity schemes, giving them between 10 and 50% of the cost of the home to buy. So that's as well as that, we need to have a massive increase in social housing, so that it's not just giving local people the ability to buy homes, they should also have a choice to have affordable homes to rent as well. So we're setting up a national housing company, Enos. Enos is a Welsh tradition where if you could build a house in a night, you owned it, yeah? So that's why it's called that. And that national housing company will be building affordable housing, helping support the building of affordable housing in every part of Wales, but also particularly in these parts of Wales where young people can't afford to stay in their communities. So thank goodness we're starting to get the radical action we should have had there years ago, to be honest with you.
Sam Rowlands, radical action. Do you think that's what's needed? Should people broadly who are in Wales with second homes be paying more if they live here?
There's a couple of issues here. I would say the underlying issue over recent years has simply been not enough houses are being built across Wales. The Welsh Government's own housing demand tells them that there needs to be around 12,000 new homes built every single year in Wales. In the last decade, the most they've ever built is 7,000. And last year, only 5,000 homes were built in Wales. It's a long way off their own assessment of house building need here in Wales. And indeed, since 1999, the run rate of new houses being built is about 50% fewer homes are being built in Wales than in previous decades. So that's the underlying issue. Welsh Government have not enabled developers and investors, and they themselves as social landlords, to build enough homes across Wales. On the second homes issue, I would certainly agree that there's an acute challenge around second homes in some of our communities. To get this into context, we've got about 1.4 million properties in Wales. 19,000 of those are second homes. Okay, so the number itself is not significant against the total number of houses, but in some communities there's certainly a challenge as to the way second homes are managed. Personally, I don't think taxing them 4 times council tax is the best way of managing second homes, and that's what the government are going ahead with. And we cannot conflate this issue of second homes with holiday homes. Genuine businesses that are making a big difference to the economies in our rural communities in particular, those two things cannot get mixed up.
Angela Eagle, Michelle asks, what can be done about the housing crisis and second home ownership? Would you like to do something about it? Do you see it as a problem?
Well, I think that the second homes issue is particularly a case not only in some areas in Wales, but in other places in the country that have tourist trade. And I think that what you need to do is protect the spirit and fabric of local communities, but also allow them to reap rewards from a thriving tourism sector. And it's getting the balance between those two things right, because if you get too many second homes, it destroys local communities. But if you drive too many of them out, then the tourist industry suffers. I think that what the Welsh Government are doing is really interesting, the discretionary council tax payments. That for second home hotspots, they're increasing the land transaction tax, that's stamp duty if you're not in Wales, which should put some prices down. And I think that giving local authorities power to classify homes as primary, secondary or holiday lets, which I think deals with Sam's point, will enable local communities to be empowered to decide themselves what balance they want to strike in this area. And I think that's entirely right. And I would like to see that kind of thing extended across the whole country.
Let me ask, Helen Morgan, we're in a beautiful area here, teeming with tourists. Wouldn't clamping down on second homes, shut down a huge source of income for places like this? Do you have any concerns about the sort of measures that are being discussed?
Well,
or do you think it's the right approach?
To be honest with you, I think it's the right approach. I think you need a balance between holiday lets that bring tourists in. I'm not keen on second homes because they stand empty and they hollow out communities. And you need people who work in the tourist trade to be able to live here. Otherwise, you haven't got a tourist trade, and it's really damaging to the local economy if the pubs can't open on an evening and you can't go out for dinner as a tourist. So you absolutely have to get that balance right. Jane Dodds, I know in the Senedd, worked with Plaid to bring about these changes, so fully supportive of what the Welsh Government have done there. And we'd like to see that rolled out across England to the problem areas in England, like Devon, like Cornwall, like Cumbria, where we see similar issues, and actually give local councils the planning tools they need to say, do you know what, we've got enough holiday lets here. We're not letting you turn this home into a holiday let. We're not letting you turn this lived-in full-time home to a second home, and actually let them manage the numbers that they need locally for their economy.
Briefly, Angela, and then Adam.
Well, I just think rather than somebody thinking that some planner that's distant should decide what communities look like, communities should decide that themselves, and they can have those debates locally. And I think these kinds of approaches allow that to happen, and I'll certainly be watching very closely to see how Wales does this, because I think they can be leading the way in the rest of the country.
We'll move on to our next question, which is from Alistair Cook.
Hello.
Evening, Alistair.
Good evening. Hello. This week in the Senedd, we have seen cross-party support for the proposal to give all children in Wales the right to a week's course in a residential outdoor education. Funded by the government, a similar proposal has already been put forward in Scotland. Where is Westminster on the issue, and what about children in England?
Sam Rowlands, I saw you wriggle with satisfaction at that question.
You
are behind this idea.
It's a fantastic question, I must say.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, I certainly will. I've had the privilege this week of bringing forward a member bill to the Senedd, as explained there, to ensure that every child in Wales has the opportunity to have that week-long outdoor education experiences. I know many people in this room, I'm sure many people listening on the radio will remember fondly those times they had of going away with their classmates for a few nights and having that amazing experience. It's proven to make a difference to people's physical health, clearly, mental health, and certainly an appreciation of the environment and the incredible world that is on our doorstep here. So I'm immensely proud that I received the support of the Senedd. There's a long way to go in terms of that bill coming into fruition completely. But
how much would it cost?
The cost estimate at the moment is between 10 million and 13 million pounds a year. I would argue certainly that there's some savings to be made in terms of the impact on public services, especially around health services. And actually, I would see this as an investment into the education and the long-term improvement of the lives of our young people. No, rightly or wrongly, in Wales we have a Future Generations Commission, a Future Generations Act, which looks much further than just a few years that are ahead of us. And I think this type of legislation, this type of work will make a difference for our young people for generations to come.
Helen Morgan, a good use of money?
I think it sounds like a fantastic idea. Well done for bringing that forward. I think when we go and talk to school leaders and head teachers post-pandemic, one of the things that they tell us is that young people obviously have missed out on their formal subject curriculum-based education, but they've also suffered from lack of interaction, from lack of going outside, but lack of doing extracurricular activities of all types. And I think it's really important that we recognise that our young people need to catch up on that, on those experiences that they've missed in the pandemic, because they have suffered, I think, to a greater extent than the adult population largely. So I think we're all forcing an expansion of extracurricular offer for all children, and I think that sounds like a fantastic idea.
Adam Price.
Yeah, my party was proud to support Sam's bill. I mean, we do politics differently in the Senedd, though. There's an air of cooperation always. But, and Wales is a great place to do this. I mean, Wales had the first outward bound centre in the world. The Urdd, which is the Welsh League of Youth, for a century, has had it at the heart of its activity, residential outdoor education, and the new curriculum that we are creating in Wales has at its heart the idea of learning through Cynefin. Cynefin is kind of like the Welsh word for environment, but it means so much more. But it's about learning through the place that you're in. And that we know through cognitive science that actually taking children out into the outdoors, actually, it's good for well-being, it's good for learning, forest schools, etc. I think we need to be doing more of this. Glad that we're doing it in Wales, but let's spread the word, spread the word around the world.
Angela, Alistair asks, where's Westminster on this issue? Will you be picking up the mantle and arguing for school trips?
Well, I mean, we used to do a lot of this before the huge funding cuts came down, and lots of local authorities in the northwest, my own authority, used to be always sending kids into Wales to do exactly this kind of thing, and they now cannot afford to do that. And the problem is that kids that can't afford to do this themselves are just missing out on massive amounts of opportunities to develop.
What was your favourite school trip?
My favourite school trip?
Did any stand out?
Yeah, I organised a trip from school to go down to Parliament to...
Of course you did.
To interrogate my then Tory MP.
Sam, you, quickly.
Favourite school trip? I had a slightly strange school because I was homeschooled. So my favourite school trip was down to the bottom of the garden kicking a football.
Helen?
Oh, absolutely. Trip to Dovedale to walk through the Peak District.
Adam?
Natural Science Museum. Dinosaurs every time when you're an 8-year-old. Like.
Well, I used to come here, and it's lovely to be back. Thank you very much for joining us, everybody. Sam Rowlands, Angela Regal, Helen Morgan, Adam Price. A reminder that any answers will be presented by Anita Anand on Saturday, 03700 100 444. The line's open at 12:30. But from all of us here in Betws y Coed, goodbye.